I'll move us now into the storytelling portion of our meeting. This segment is to highlight the stories found along the Willamette River and area surrounding the Portland Harbor. Next slide. In a moment, we will hear from Cherice Bock with Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon and Oregon Interfaith Power and Light. Cherice is also a collaborative group member. It's been shared many times by Portland Harbor community members and leaders that doing outreach and collaborating with churches and faith-based institutions is important to connect to those cultures and communities that are faith-oriented and include them in this cleanup process, which is why we're grateful to have Cherice to share her story with us tonight. Her dedication to honor and explore the intersections of faith and the environment is really inspiring. She wrote a beautiful article called Sister Willamette, Co-Lamenting with My River, and we'll share that article link in the chat. I hope you enjoy her story. Thank you for being here. Cherice, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you again for this gathering and an honor to be able to share my story. So again, my name is Cherice Bock, and I lead Oregon Interfaith Power and Light through Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. And that means that I get to organize people of faith in Oregon to work toward climate justice through organizing events and education, engaging in local, state, and federal advocacy, and through supporting climate resilience projects in faith communities. To give you a little more context for my story today, I also serve as adjunct faculty in the Creation Care program at Portland Seminary and in the theology department at University of Portland. And so in addition to a Master of Divinity degree, I also hold a Master of Science in Environmental Studies, and I'm close to completing my PhD in Environmental Studies. So my work is really at the intersection of spirituality, religion, and environmental concerns with a focus on the justice and ethical issues relating to the climate. I chose to focus my career on environmental justice because I grew up as a Quaker, and I heard stories about how people from my faith tradition helped with abolition of slavery and women's rights to vote and resolving conflict using peaceful tactics and nonviolent direct action. I wondered what the social justice issue of our time was that I should be working on. And I looked around and noticed how all the justice issues are literally grounded in the environment. So I really came at this from a perspective of human rights and equity. But as I grew to understand and gain more wisdom around environmental and climate concerns, I became more and more aware of the community of all life on the earth, our common home, including bodies of water. And one major event that really shifted my worldview on this was when I started to think of the Willamette River as a being, not just as a resource. I grew up in Newburgh, which is upstream from the Portland Harbor, a little bit southwest of Portland. The Willamette flows by the town, and sometimes my friends and I would go boating, and people would always make fun of how dirty the river was and caution each other about spending too much time in the water because it was so polluted. When my view on the river really shifted was in about 2014 when I team taught a master's level course on eco-justice. We invited a local pastor, Reverend Sylvain Nilsson Gooden, and a couple of her friends to lead something called the River's Lament for our students. Reverend Nilsson Gooden and others put together a beautiful story of the Willamette River told from the river's perspective. We went through 7 stations as we traversed the University of Portland campus, which overlooks the Portland Harbor. At the first station, we learned about the Superfund project and the reasons for it, and then heard the river's story as she introduced us to her relatives, her parents, the tributaries, her grandparents, the watersheds, her great-grandparents, the mountain ranges, and her great ancestor, the ocean. We also heard of the people who lived in a relationship with the river for thousands of years, the indigenous peoples of this region. As we progressed through the various stations, we heard about the changes to the land and water over the last 150 or so years, until Station 5, which was really poignant, in which the group leaders read a litany of all the toxic substances that have been found in the Willamette's water and sediment. The description of each chemical's toxic properties takes longer to read than it takes to walk to the next station. The lament also dips into the Christian culpability for land theft, enslavement, and destruction of ecosystems due to the Catholic Church's doctrine of discovery, mirrored as well by the Church of England and other European state churches. At the final station, people chose a stone, a leaf, or a stick to symbolize their fear, grief, or anger after hearing the story of the river, and share what they feel, what they learned, and how they'll respond. Because of this experience, I started thinking of the Willamette as a sister I had previously taken for granted and disrespected. As mentioned, I wrote an article called Sister Willamette, Co-Lamenting with My River, sharing more about this experience. And since then, I've continued to lead my class through the River's Lament every other year when the Eco-Justice course runs. I update it each year with new information about the Superfund site. So when I started working for Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon in this role and learned about the opportunity of participating in this group, I was excited to be able to join and be in solidarity with the Willamette and those who are advocating for her continued health. This experience with the River's Lament, as well as other experiences, shifted my perspective to consider my interconnectedness with the rest of the community of all life. And this informs and directs my teaching and advocacy with people of faith around the state. So in closing, I'll read you a brief part of the final station of the River's Lament to show you a window into the transformative work that Christians are trying to do to lament and come to terms with the harm that has been caused by our ancestors, as well as the voice for justice and love of neighbor that forms the heart of our tradition. And in the Christian tradition, where do we come for forgiveness? Where do we come to be born again? We come to the water. We come to the waters of baptism. We come with humility, with broken hearts and tears in our eyes to the waters of baptism for a chance to begin again. We come giving thanksgiving for this living water that heals and cleanses, washing away our tears and pouring forgiveness over us. But today, there is no word of forgiveness. Today, there is no consolation. Today, we just sit here knowing there is no escape from the present reality or from the consequences of what has already been done to the river. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherice. Thank you so much. I'd like to offer any collaborative members, if you'd like to share your appreciations for Cherice and her story, it could be in the chat or verbally.
Hello, this is Michael Pouncil. Thank you, Cherice, for taking out the time to make this connection. It's absolutely beautiful. You made my heart sing. It's great to hear, and I'm excited to read the rest of your essay.
Thank you, Michael, and hearing some other things in the chat. And Doug, I see you came off mute.
Oh, I just forgot to go on.
That's all good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Cherice, and thank you for adding another perspective and another story to the thread of the Willamette River.